that we can use in developmental psychology. So let us discuss them one by one. The naturalistic observations. Researchers observe individuals in their natural environments to understand their behaviors as they naturally occur. For example, a researcher observes children's playtime in a preschool setting to understand their social interactions and problem solving behaviors. Naturalistic observations provide real world context and authentic insights into behavior. However, there are some limitations. Researchers may have limited control over environment, and their presence can sometimes affect participants' behavior. Next is structured observations. Observations occur in controlled settings such as laboratories where researchers create specific conditions to elicit target behaviors. For example, researchers create a controlled play environment to observe how children react to specific social situations. Structured observations offer precise control over variables and ensure equal opportunities for participants to display behaviors of interest. However, there are some limitations. Artificial setting may not fully present real-life situation. Next is self-report methods. Researchers gather information directly from participants through interviews, questionnaires, or surveys. For example, participants complete questionnaire assessing their levels of anxiety and strengths. So self-report methods allow participants to express their experiences efficiently and collect data from large number of participants. However, responses may be influenced by social desirability bias or memory limitations, so affecting the data accuracy. Next is ethnography. Researchers immerse themselves in a natural, themselves in cultural or contextual group to understand their behaviors, beliefs, and practices. For example, an anthropologist lives among remote indigenous tribes, study their daily customs and traditions. Ethnography provides deep insights into cultural meanings and practices, but it can be time consuming and findings may not apply universally. Next is experimental research. Researchers manipulate one or more independent variables to assess their impact on dependent variables, often using random assignment. Researchers test the effect of new teaching method and students' math performance by assigning some students to the new method, others to the traditional method. So experimental designs allow for causal inferences and minimize biases through random assignment. Controlled conditions may not fully represent real-world situations. Next is correlational research. This research examines relationships between variables without manipulating them and quantifies associations using correlation coefficients. For example, researchers investigate the relationship between hours of sleep and academic performance in college students. So, correlational studies efficiently explore naturally occurring relationships. However, correlation does not imply causation, and third variables can influence results. Next is longitudinal design. Participants are studied repeatedly over time to track changes within individuals. For example, researchers follow a group of individuals from childhood into adulthood to study how their career choices evolve. Longitudinal designs reveal developmental patterns and individual differences over time. So they are subject to issues like practice effects, bias sampling, and cohort effects. Next is cross-sectional design. Different age groups are studied simultaneously to compare age-related trends. For example, researchers compare the problem-solving skills of children, adolescents, and adults in a single study. So cross-sectional studies efficiently assess age-related differences, but they cannot capture individual developmental trajectories and may be influenced by cohort effects. Next is sequential design. Sequential designs combine elements of both, for example, longitudinal and cross-sectional research, allowing for examination of age-related trends and individual developmental changes. So for example, researchers can conduct a study that follows several cohorts of participants over time, while also studying different age groups concurrently. So these designs offer comprehensive understanding of developmental changes and help distinguish between age and cohort effects. So limitations, they can be complex and time consuming. Lastly, the developmental designs. So developmental designs combine experimental and developmental research methods to examine causal influences on development. For example, researchers study on the effects of early childhood interventions on long-term cognitive development using experimental methods. So these designs allow for investigation of cause and effect relationships within a developmental context. Ethical constraints and potential limitations of controlled environments must be considered. So these research methods provide a range of tools for studying human development, and researchers select them based on their research questions, objectives, and the specific aspects of development. So they aim to investigate understanding and the strengths and limitations of each method is crucial for conducting valid and meaningful research in the field of human development. Again, let's review some of our studies. So, systematic observation involves carefully watching and recording behaviors, events, or phenomenon in a structured and organized manner. Next is self-reports. So, self-reports involve gathering data directly from individuals, asking them from questions about their thoughts, feelings, behaviors, or experiences. Next is clinical or case studies. So clinical or case studies involve an in-depth examination of single individual, group, or case to gain a comprehensive understanding of particular phenomenon or condition. Next is ethnography. Ethnography involves immersive research within a particular cultural group or community to understand their customs and behaviors, beliefs, and social dynamics. So overall, the systematic observation focuses on objective data collection through structured observation. Self-reports involve obtaining information directly from individuals about experiences. Clinical or case studies, on the other hand, provide in-depth insights into specific cases or individuals, and ethnography aims to understand the cultural context and behaviors within a particular group or community. So each method has its strengths and is chosen based on the research goals and the nature of phenomenon being studied. Next is the correlation and experimental. Briefly, let us review the correlation method is used to examine the relationships between variables without manipulating them. On the other hand, experimental method is used to establish cause and effect relationships between variables by manipulating one variable or the independent variable and observing its impact on another variable, which is the dependent variable. So overall, the correlation method examined associations between variables, while variables are designed, experimental methods are designed to determine causal relationships by manipulating one or more variables. Again, briefly, let's try to review longitudinal design. It involves studying same group or individuals or participants over an extended period of time with multiple data collection points at different time intervals. Next is cross-cultural design. Involve studying different groups or individuals at the same point in time, representing different age groups or cohorts. Next is sequential designs, for example, combining elements of both longitudinal and cross-sectional approaches. So researchers study multiple cohorts over time, allowing for the examination of both age-related changes and cohort effects. The following are some research ethical considerations. So protection from harm. So in a study involving preschool children, for example, researchers are testing the effects of new educational intervention. So they must ensure that the intervention does not cause any physical or psychological harm to the children. So the researchers closely monitor the children's emotional well-being and academic progress throughout the study and have mechanisms in place to address any adverse effects and promptly. Next is informed consent. So when conducting research, for example, with adolescents, researchers must obtain informed consent from both adolescents and their parents or legal guardians. So the consent process includes explaining the purpose of the study, procedures involved, the potential risks and benefits. So adolescents and their parents must fully understand that participation entails before agreeing to take part in the research. Next is privacy. So researchers are conducting, for example, a study on adolescent social media use. So they collect data from participants' online profiles, so which may contain personal information and private messages. To protect participants' privacy, researchers ensure that all data are anonymized and that no identifying information is disclosed in the research findings or publication. Next is knowledge or results. So, for example, in a longitudinal study following the individuals from childhood to adulthood, researchers discovered that some participants have developed mental health issues over time. So, ethical concerns arise regarding whether or how to share these findings with the affected individual. So, researchers must weigh the potential benefits of providing this information for early intervention against the potential harm of sharing distressing information. And lastly, the beneficial treatment. So in a clinical trial, for example, involving children with developmental disorder, researchers are testing a new treatment. So ethical concerns emerge if the treatment is found to be highly effective, as it may be unethical to continue withholding the beneficial treatment from the control group. In such cases, researchers must consider ethical guidelines and the best interests of the participants when decisions about treatment allocation. So overall, these examples illustrates different ethical considerations in developmental psychology, including ensuring protection of participants from harm, obtaining informed consent, safeguarding privacy, handling knowledge of research results, and providing beneficial treatments when appropriate. So researchers and ethics review boards carefully assess and address these concerns to conduct ethical and responsible research in the field.